Hey everyone, it's Michael Faree here with Lead Generation World. Thanks for joining me for another podcast. We've got a great guest for you today. We've got Michael McGuire of Noble Biz. Michael has over 20 years of experience in the call services and call center business. He's called hundreds of thousands of leads. And so we're going to talk about all types of different things that are occurring in the call center business, what's happened with the pandemic, some best practices, and then, of course, the product that Noble Biz is offering as well. So hold tight for that. We'll bring him on in just a moment. But we also want to mention we've got Lead Generation World that with new dates. We've got it moved to March 21st through the 23rd. So we're really, really excited about that. That moves us away from all the holiday spike in COVID cases and moves us a few months down the road. So we're really, really excited to, again, host an in-person conference, probably the only one for the first part of the year. So we're really excited to bring the lead gen industry together. So make sure you sign up and register today. And we'll see you in Orlando in March between the 21st and the 23rd. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring Michael on and start talking a little shop. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Lead Generation World podcast. I got my good friend Michael McGuire with me today. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah. It's good to see you, man. It's been a little while. We spent some time together at Anomaly Squared, which was a call services business that was working across multiple industries. But you got into the industry young and pretty early in life, right? How'd you get into the call services or call center business?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. My dad, I came home 16 years old. My dad was like, hey, this operator job came into town. It's like $7 an hour. You should go check it out. I was painting houses and doing other small town Kansas, boy work, haying, all that stuff in the summer. And so I walked in and it was quite crazy because I came in the exit, right? And there's these people standing up and they're using their hands and they're hollering and I was kind of nervous. I'm like, what's going on? This is not an operator, let me transfer you to this or that. And so this guy, never forget, his name's Joe Wagner. He worked for a long time, Jersey guy. Imagine Jersey in Kansas. And he's like, hey, you, come here, right? And so I thought I was in trouble. So I went up, like, oh, what are you doing? You looking to work? And I was like, yeah, I'm looking to work. And he's like, okay. And he gave me this script and he's like, read it to me. And I read it and he was like, no, read it to me. So I read it louder and he was like, all right, can you work till 9? This is like 3:00.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll do it, right? So I get out there. My training class was like 15 minutes. Read this, read that, read this, read that. This was a fundraising place for police, fire, that type of stuff. So it was very in your face, not quite boiler room, but, very loud, proud, type environment. So tried to quit in the middle of the shift, tried to leave.
You did?
Yeah, it was not my cup of tea. And
How old were you then?
16.
16, yeah.
Yeah, and so this guy, his name's Carl, he's like, hey, come here, I'll help you, da-da-da. And so, he really said, listen, this has nothing to do with what you say, it's how you say it. He's like, you're calling for the police, you're calling for this, you need to put yourself in that mindset. And so I was like, okay, I can do that. And, the rest is history. I was the number one caller from that point on at 16 for a very long time, set all types of records within the company and the industry. And so my next step was to become a manager. So I was doing part-time college, high school at the time, and they wanted me to go to Virginia to open my first call center. I was 19 years old. So
wow.
Pretty crazy. I was, just had Quentin, which is my oldest son, and me and my wife was like, let's do it. What else do we have to, offer in little small town Kansas? So did it, opened that center. I worked with a company called Civic Development Group for 11 years and opened additional 8 to 9 call centers throughout the U.S. Traditional fundraising one side, and then your traditional telemarketing, Discover cards, sales, all that type of stuff in the other side of the business. But it was like one of those things where you say you just had a knack. You just had this natural ability to talk to people, and then obviously train people to be able to do that job. And just done it ever since.
Well,
So
is there a difference though? Like, there's people that can get on the phone, right, and do well, but at
mhm,
19 or 20, managing people or hiring
sure.
people and training people, that's a whole other thing, right?
Yeah. So one thing that I always had the ability to do is to show them how to do it. And
Yeah,
no matter my age or anything, if I could show them that I could execute at a very high level, they believed me. They just wanted to also execute at a high level. So a lot of my training, especially early on, was just do as I do. I can teach you how to become very effective and very good. And then I started learning management skills as they came. But you're right. I was 19 years old telling grown men, grown women, firing them and hiring them and all this type of stuff. And, it really was at first as simple as I can teach everybody in here to be highly successful. So if you follow that and you follow that recipe, then you're going to be really good. And so they could kind of forget about all the other things, my age and,
yeah.
lack of experience and all that.
So you mentioned the recipe. What do you think the recipe was back then for being successful?
So mine was born. So I went to 22 different schools before I went to high school. Okay. So I think mine was ingrained as a child, as moving, as having to learn and make new friends and think on the fly. Quite honestly, I think that's what prepared me to be able to have really quick conversations, really make people feel comfortable with me on the phone was from that natural ability that I've had to learn and adapt, growing up. So a lot of that and a lot of the things that I would teach other people is that same ability. You have a very short period of time to win that person's attention, win their friendship, everything, and you can't see them and they can't see you. So you have to be able to develop just the small skills of how you sound. You got to be quick-witted. You got to be able to talk to somebody in a genuine fashion so they believe what you got to say in a very short period.
And do you think that recipe's changed at all over time, or is it the same?
No, I think a lot of it's the same. I think, different skill sets you need for different positions. So now when everything was just pick up the phone and dial,
Yeah,
that skill set worked really well. But now you have to have different skill sets. You have to be able to maybe handle a chat, or you have to be able to send an email, or you have to be able to solve a technical problem. So the challenge for call centers now is it's a lot different than just hiring somebody that speaks really good, that can, think on their feet. They're also having to look for other skill sets of, can they multitask? Do they have some technology in their background that goes with just the ability to talk and communicate with people?
yeah. I want to get into that a little bit, but I before we do, I want to talk about a little bit about the process. Maybe fundraising is a little bit different than like call transfers or like turning a
Uh-huh.
lead into a call transfer when it comes to the actual process of dialing a person. I don't know if it is or not, but back then I'm guessing the process was just dial, 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 dial. Now it's maybe a little bit more intelligent. Has it changed much, that the cadence or the process of dialing a campaign then and now?
Sure,
20
the
years later.
channels have definitely changed. So now people communicate differently. So, whenever I have a problem with an issue, I may just go on the website and send an email now. That would be my first option. And then escalate it at a certain level to a phone call. A phone call may be the worst after I'm already completely teed off and I couldn't fix the problem at a smaller level. Back then, really our only line of communication, I mean, this is pre-cell phone, the only line of communication we really had was the telephone,
Yeah.
was, just call and to be able to fix that. So I think the modes of how people communicate's different, and I think adapting to that and being able to kind of be able to communicate in those other channels, and it's the preferred channel of the person you're talking to. So if they prefer to text, you need to be able to text. If they prefer to call, which there's still a lot of people that prefer the telephone, then you need to have that ability to do that. And that's what's really changed. Is just now it's all about the customer and what does the customer prefer.
So when we're looking at like just calls though, you know, in lead gen, at least when people are buying, you know, third party leads or whatever it may be, and then calling those individuals, um, you know, there were times where, you know, buyers or brands would call the leads hundreds of times, right? They just
Yeah.
dial, and then, you know, the automated system would just ring their phone all the time. But that's obviously not the smartest way to go about doing it, right?
Right.
I mean, so
You know,
are there sort of best practices or cadences from your experience that sort of have worked for dialing out on I'm sure it's different for all types of different leads, but
sure.
you know, generally speaking, are there best practices today that work for, you know, appropriate outbound dialing
Yeah.
cadence?
So there's two things. One, when you're making that call, who are you? Right. So when you're making that call, are you a local caller ID? Are you a 888-866? Each additional time when you make that dial, are you displaying the same number that's just called them 52 times? Or are you another local number? So when it comes to the attempts, how many attempts you make when we're just talking pure phone call, the most important piece is being able to display a different number or a local number to that person that's going to attempt them to pick up the phone. And then when you start talking about other methods of communication, of course, if you called them 20 times in a row and they haven't picked up the phone, calling them 21 is probably not going to create any other result.
Yeah.
So there is different cadences that I guess is an industry term that we use that we've used and that change again. You know, maybe you do a call and then a text, or a call and an email, or a email and a text. And so there's been studies done where, you know, different industries, people have different cadences. They may say these are the best 8 cadences to insurance, right? And so a lot of those cadences, the funny thing is most of those cadences is built on the technology that they have. So they may be able to email, text, and call. So, well, that's going to be the 3 cadences. Now, as technology changes and there's multiple channels going in, I think you'll start seeing companies utilize, you know, other things like, you know, being able to reach out in social media, being able to, have a chat. So when somebody comes on and all they want to do is chat, and then you can transfer that chat to another insurance agent because they don't want to deal with their phone call. So I think as technology evolves, you're going to see those cadences and those best practices evolve as well. But just making phone calls as your primary source, I would say is probably the worst, you know, possible way of only getting people to pick up the phone.
Yeah. We had a mutual contact, and this is, I think, something that comes up all the time that I put you in touch with. You know, there's brands out there, and even lead sellers or lead generators that, you know, talk about generating calls or having a internal team to handle their outbound dials for the leads that they receive, and then transfer them into their own, you know, sales team or whatever it
Sure.
may be. I guess for this question, we can talk about just specifically a brand like an insurance company that's, you know, thinking, hey, I'm getting all these leads, but I don't want my my high price, my closer necessarily to sit there and dial out on all these leads. And they start to consider, well, should I build out a sales, you know, sort of a call team internally, or should I outsource it offshore, onshore? How do they go about sort of evaluating that decision? Should I have it first internally in my own office? Is that something I want to manage, or should I
Right.
outsource it?
So I would look at 2 things when I've helped other people kind of make this decision is, one, what is the volume, right? So if it's just, you know, a few leads that you think you'll be able to handle internally, then there's no need to create a whole nother process to be able to do that. Now, once you make the decision that I am paying these people now, you know, half the time qualifying a lead, right? Versus closing business and writing business. Then you have to make the determination of what are the cost factors and what is my experience level. So if I'm going to have an internal team and I'm going to create an internal team, do I have the experience and the knowledge, or does somebody on my team have that to do that? And then what is the cost behind that? So if I'm in LA or San Francisco and I have to hire a team of people to qualify leads, what is that going to cost me? What is the cost per lead at that point? Or does it make more sense to go to somebody that's already a pro in that field? Maybe they already do that. Maybe it's an offshore, or maybe it's onshore, or whatever your decision is. And that's all they do. So they're probably going to do it better than you are internally, because they do that on a day-to-day basis. And believe it or not, they could probably do it at a more cost-effective manner, because now they're not carrying payroll, insurance, all those other things that you're going to have to carry. So it's really a business case decision on, where you're at. Normally, if you have enough volume to look at that, then most of the time I would say start looking to outsource that process, unless you have somebody on your team that, already has maybe worked in call centers, or maybe they've, built a team of virtual agents. Then in that case, you just have to decide if it's what's the most cost effective and the best bang for your buck.
Yeah. So let's assume we don't have that internal experience. Now we want to outsource it.
Sure.
When evaluating onshore versus offshore, so let's say the Philippines, or I don't know, somewhere else, is it purely cost, and how do you go about sort of evaluating those two things? Because obviously it's going to be, I would think, a little bit more expensive onshore, but they're going to be potentially more skilled. I don't know. Versus offshore, and how do you balance that?
So the first thing I always say is your customer, your client, if you're looking at offshore, is there going to be any type of issue with language barrier? Okay. So if you have a hypersensitive client, that maybe it will be an issue, or maybe they may be upset because you're not giving jobs to US people, or that case. That's your first evaluation point, is what is my client gonna say? If it's a case where maybe it's a lead and you're just qualifying a lead, and the client really has a very short period of time with them and they're not hypersensitive to that, then I think you can make your decision. If you're comfortable with going offshore, it's always going to be more cost effective. I mean, offshore is always going to save you money. It's going to be cheaper per hour, that type of stuff. And then you have to evaluate the performance. So back in the day when I used to compete with offshore companies within my internal call center, we always had to outperform, right? Because we knew that our cost was automatically going to be more. So if the cost is double, then you'd have to write performance that's double to justify them coming to you for your performance. So really the evaluation at that point is, what am I having this person do or this company do for me? And what's the level of complexity? And what's the level I want to pay for? So if it's a really complex situation where you're going to have more hand-holding, or you figure that they need to know maybe the US market a little bit more, then that would be a case where I would look internally. If it's a case where you feel like they don't need to know the US market, the lingo doesn't matter, and this is a pure cost maneuver, then I would definitely look outsource.
So when we're looking at offshore, are there certain areas that seem to be more in tune with the U.S. market than others?
Philippines is definitely heavy. And the way that I've used Philippines in the past, I've had multiple centers over there that I've ran. Definitely heavy in the customer service. They're very oriented towards being very polite, being very helpful. I would say in the sales environment, they wouldn't be my first choice. Mexico, Costa Rica, even India at some point are just more aggressive in nature. I've seen that quite a few over, quite a few different industries. So that's just my best practices that I've seen, and it's definitely usually different by region or by area.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let's take it, back to, the U.S. here. Obviously, we're dealing with a pandemic. For many organizations, they had maybe 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 people inside a office building, sitting there dialing on outbound leads or whatever it may be. Obviously, that all changed. They had to go home. They had to go virtual. What did you see out there? What was it like for call centers to handle the pandemic and that stay at home orders?
Yeah, so it was definitely, and I was in it, living it, and the first thing was safety, right? So we thought immediately, we have to regroup. Obviously, we cannot have all these people in the building, no matter if the state mandated it or not. So there was some states that you could stay open with certain feet, so on and so forth,
Yeah.
between the people, and so the first thing we did is we said we need to make sure everybody's safe. And then we had to make sure our clients, were comfortable to continue to dial and to continue to be able to do their business. So if they're impacted and they don't have the amount of agents to take the leads, or they don't have the amount of agents, then we would have to adjust with that. Quite honestly, a lot of call centers weren't ready to send all their people home. The technology wasn't there. I've started virtual, 8-9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the companies that I was involved with, I've started creating virtual teams when that technology arrives, just because it's easier to recruit. It's easier to be able, bad weather, inclement weather, those type of things. You have these people at home. So it was a mad scramble. Everybody had to either find the technology. If they didn't have it, they had to develop a system to get people home. Then they had to develop a system to make sure that their technology was able to where they could dial and do the things they need to do. And even now today, they're still scrambling when it comes to things like security, and they're coming to things like performance, because all it was is let's get everybody home. Let's get it stabilized to where we're doing the work. And then now they have to come back through with saying, okay, how do we get performance back to where it was at? How do we build, infrastructure on training and onboarding and all those things that you don't realize that when you're inside a facility is very smooth. They can bring you their IDs. You can do their I-9s. Now you have to be able to generate all these processes to do this virtually.
So, and I gotta imagine that that's a huge challenge, right? But you guys were able to navigate that and make that work, and you've done that before in the past, moving internal teams to virtual. What's your general thought about it? I mean, from a success, standpoint, performance standpoint, and managerial, like, what's your just sort of general opinion on moving, internal teams to virtual, or is one better than the other? Or does virtual work?
Yeah, so I came from brick and mortar, right?
Yeah.
We talk about my experience. So at first I was like, you're going to lose performance, and you don't have the contests and the raffles and the one-on-one and the coaching and all those things that I assumed accounted for 20, 30, maybe 40% extra in performance. So I bought into the virtual environment when all of a sudden recruiting got very challenging in the towns that I had call centers in. So once a call center's been in a town 6, 7, 8, 10 years, you start, especially the size of the towns. These are towns that usually have higher unemployment rates and sometimes lower population. So now you are churning through a lot of people in a short period of time. And then after a while, you just run out of trained talent. So virtually, I said, hey, the technology's there. Why don't we start recruiting everywhere, right? Why is there, you don't have the limitations of just your borders or a 20-minute drive to your call center. So that's what got me down the virtual thinking. I ended up closing 3 brick and mortar call centers and sending those reps home at first, and then adding people to that nucleus. So that way you already have trained people, they're already doing the job, and then you can start bringing them in. So it sounds fun. It sounds great. You can recruit everywhere and
Right.
everything's great, and the negative piece is what we just kind of talked about. So you don't have the face to face. I think training and recruiting is easy. I think training them and getting them down the curve is a longer period of time. So if it was 30 days in a call center, it's going to be 60 days virtually, because you just don't have the ability to explain yourself maybe as much as you would as a coach or a team leader.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think now, since there's a lot of people home and a lot of people are virtual, now companies are running into that turnover monster. So now you have to compete with everybody else for virtual agents. And then maybe your job is a little tough. So now they're just going to jump ship and maybe go somewhere else. So I think 2021 is going to be, in the call center world, is how do we fix our turnover? I would say it's went up 10 to 15, 20%
Wow.
the last 6 months.
Wow. That's surprising. I would, and is that due to the lack of performance and having to just get rid of the lower performing people, or is that people just deciding to go somewhere else for a better offer? Or
It's a combination of that and the fact that people just aren't equipped to work from home.
yeah,
I mean, they like the idea.
yeah,
Maybe they go out and purchase a Chromebook, and now I'm an at-home employee.
yeah,
I've trained people at home for years now, and you have to have your own space. You have to, you cannot do this job from the kitchen table. And I think some of that, you'll see that turnover quickly for that reason, where they love the idea of working at home. Well, they get booted up, and then they just don't have the processes in place or the discipline or any of the other stuff of making that work. So I think you see that. The other piece is I think people, they're really going into a new industry. So if you're a factory worker, or you were this type of worker, now all of a sudden you have all these at-home jobs that are available. Sure, they sign up for them, and then all of a sudden, they get told no 100 times, and they're like, I just can't do this.
yeah, yeah. And they don't have any support around them either, right? They don't have the team
Correct.
members dealing with the same thing, or going to lunch, or the break room, or the cheering squad,
Yeah, one of the
managers.
big things now is mental health in the call center and the virtual agents. So I don't think we fully know the impact that's going on with people that were in a call center, which is like being at high school.
Yeah, yeah,
It's very stimulating. You have friends. It's very social environment too. Now you're stuck at home. You may have your kids there. You may have your, significant other there, and you can't go nowhere, and you're used to that stimulation. So, the other big topic besides turnover, I think, we'll be going into the future is, if we do stay virtual, how do we create those processes to bring people back in? How do you bring in, and it's never going to be the same, but you have to have something that's going to, be able to include them, because that's how they've operated for years.
yeah. It's definitely something to think about. I'm curious, when the transition happened. There's, with the pandemic and people going virtual, um, and not only going virtual, but so many people not going into the office, even outside of the call center business. Did contact rates change at all? Did performance go up at all? Were people more willing to have a conversation out of curiosity?
So I think you did see like contacts in general, like, right, because people are at home now, so
Yeah,
they would answer their phone more, just in general. Um, but as that went up, I think especially in the outbound world, you also had like the call labeling and the scam and spam and all that other stuff kind of came out at the same time. So that's been ratcheting up as people have been home. So um, unfortunately, I'd love to say, hey, yeah, everybody went home, contacts jumped by 20%. Um, it did I would say especially in the fundraising, lead gen, that type of environment, we did see a increase in contact rate. But I wouldn't say it was like, a game changer.
yeah, yeah. Just kind of curious
Sure.
to know what the sort of human behavior was when everyone was at home. Were they picking the phone up more, or what?
Right.
Um, So let's talk technology. You're at Noble Biz
Mhm.
now. What is Noble Biz?
So I made a decision. So NobleBiz is a contact center solution, also a carrier. So we specialize in contact center traffic. So that's the only type of calls and the volumes that we do on our carrier on our side. And then we have a number of different solutions for the contact center space. So what we talked about a little bit was where I see a big shift in the contact center, the call center space, is the different channels. So a lot of companies, and I've worked for those companies, have built some systems and kind of built everything around those systems for calls, inbound calls, outbound calls, and maybe they said, "Hey, I want to get into texting." So they had to go out and find a texting platform, and now they say, "Hey, I want to get into email." So they go out and find an email platform. And so one of the big buzzwords that you're going to hear moving now is called Omni. So it's the Omni channel.
Yeah.
Before it was kind of multi-channel. So it's like I can do calls and then I can do emails and I can do text, but none of it connected. You couldn't report off any of it. And for your agents, it just made their job harder. So if you have an agent now that is in one platform to make calls, then they had to go on another platform to text, and then they had to go on another platform to do email or Facebook or whatever the mode is. So we've created a really slick solution. It's called Omni Plus. It's one desktop for your agent. So you can have Twitter, you can have Facebook, you can have inbound, outbound calls, and it's all right there on one desktop. Everything has data to it. So it's not like you're pulling data from 5 different systems. So you can make really good business decisions on that. And that's kind of our platform that we launched right into the pandemic, and the one that I'm most excited about. I think companies now are starting to open up to, I have to do more than just calls, and I have to be able to communicate in whatever the customer's comfortable level of communication is. So that's one of our platforms that we specialize in. I left the call center, 24 years of operating, running at all levels, went into the technology space. So that's where I'm at
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, that's great. So I know one of the things that was a struggle in when I was sort of with you was
Mhm.
reporting. Reporting seemed to be really difficult with
Right.
with
I
some of
remember you telling me every day, "Why can't we get this
with
report?"
yeah, how do we get these reports? And I think that had to do with a number of issues, but whether it's 5.9 or whatever the
Sure.
the big call platform is that doesn't allow for specific reporting. How does NobleBiz
Yeah.
sort of take a look at and be able to allow for reporting to take place?
Yeah, so the biggest is how it's built, right? So NobleBiz, you have your own instance. So it's not a hosted instance. You're not in there with multiple companies to where your reports you get are maybe canned reports. So if I have 5 clients that I have all within this dialing, platform, then I may have 20 canned reports. But as well as I do, every client is different.
Right.
Every client's going to want to see different KPIs. They're going to want to see different types of reports. So the first thing is, how is it set up? In NobleBiz, we set up your Omni solution in your own instance. So it's like your own personal dialing platform. So if Mike wants to make his own report for X, Y, and Z, and he has to send that report to the client, then there's no 50 other things that you have to do to be able to pull down the data and so on and so forth. The other piece is being able to have all the different channels within the same system. So a lot of systems are what I call bolt-on systems. So you have the calls, and then you bolt on the text, and then you bolt on the emails. In the Omni Plus solution, everything is one process. Everything is reported within the same platform. So if you wanted to see, hey, I had this customer call in 3 times, and now the 4th time, I want to route that call to a supervisor. I don't even want it to go to another agent. Within the system, you can have that. Or maybe on the 2nd time, you want them to email the supervisor that this person's called in twice now. So there's so many different things that you can do now within the multi-channel, the omni-channel environment. And each piece of that is reportable based on whatever the activity is that comes in.
You bring up an interesting thing about inbound calls, because a lot of systems are great for outbound, and then really have a hard time with inbound calls and being able to identify where they should go and what they should do. How does that work with Noble? Can they take inbound, or with the Omni,
Absolutely.
inbound calls, and be able to direct it appropriately?
Yeah, so definitely take inbound calls. The other piece is in the industry, you're going to want to segment those calls based on people's skill level. Okay, so it's skill based routing.
Yeah.
So when that call comes in, I may have a group of agents that can handle inbound, outbound, multi-channel, maybe Facebook, whatever. They're veterans. They've been here a long time. So based on what happens on that inbound call, you can decide where you're going to route that call based on the agent's skill level. You can add self-service tools. So if you said, hey, you know what, I want this, maybe this client can call in and be able to fix their own problem very quickly. There's self-service tools that, won't even escalate to an agent. But the biggest thing that I caution people with is, if you're going to go self-service, make sure it's good. Because the worst thing you want is somebody to fumble around in a self-service tool, or they get routed to one agent and they have to tell their whole story. And then the agent's like, oh, that's not my department. Let me shift you over to Steve. And then Steve has no idea what you're talking about. So I always say, if you're going to have the self-service and the routing tools, make sure it's good. Make sure if it's self-service, they can really fix their own problems. And if you're going to route them to agents, understand that, that skill-based routing is highly important. Just because at the end of the day, the customer is going to be very frustrated if they have to go through multiple levels.
Yeah. And are you alluding to like press one type of scenarios where they're like, press two for this, press one for this? And is that what you're?
Yeah. So IVRs have they've grown in the capabilities, right? Yeah. So you'll have some now that you can talk to Noble Biz, and you have somewhere you could enter in information. It can try to solve your problem. Banking industry does it all the time, right? You call in, they automatically tell you what your account balance is. Well, why do they do that? Because that's what most people call in and ask for, right? So a self-service tool can either route you in different areas. It can maybe solve the problem by answering and hitting a database that maybe is something that people call in for. Or it could be as simple as you said, it could be an IVR, to where if you hit 2, it'll spill it over to the sales team. If you hit 1, it'll go there. Another big thing that we're going to see kind of moving into 2021 is, AI, artificial intelligence, and self-service tools, and actually making them to where people can fix their problems without having to talk to people.
How sophisticated is that? Like the inbound sort of routing of calls based on the consumer's information. So, are they able to speak, things, and you guys to be able to translate into directing it to the right? Like, tell me
Absolutely.
what you sometimes you'll hop on a call and I'll say, tell me what you're looking for. I can understand checking, savings, this or sales or whatever. Is that something that's sophisticated that Noble Biz can do, or is that
absolutely?
Oh, wow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And really there's 2 different technologies. And so you have the technology that you can speak to, and basically the technology that you have to hit buttons to. Nowadays, as databases grow, so will the technology of what you can pull and what you can utilize in the speech, department. So there does have to be something, some type of database that it has to be able to, recognize what you said, what it's going to pull the data. But, the technology is growing now to where most people should be able to fix a lot of their problems without having to be escalated to a phone call, if it's done right. If it's not done right, then by the end of it, you're going to have a customer so upset that, it can compound the problem.
Right. All right, let's talk about outbound dialing, for a minute, in terms of, again, our sort of lead gen world where, somebody may be buying leads or generating leads and they want to turn them into a call transfer, whatever it may be.
Sure.
With the rules and bringing in the omni-channel aspect of texting and email, I assume Noble Biz allows me to sort of go in there and build these rules so that a couple calls will take place. Okay, if that doesn't happen, then a text and then automated text will happen. Is that how it works, or is it sort of a manual text? How does the
No, you can build within the rules of how you would want that call flow to be. The first thing is I always tell people at Noble Biz, the one big advantage I think that we have over a lot of others is we're our own carrier. So we have a product called Local Touch, and it runs through the carrier service. So this is not anything you have to manage in your dialer. And Local Touch basically creates a multi-local CID process. So if you call me in North Carolina, your number is going to show up as a local North Carolina number. Well, what does that do? That makes me want to answer the phone. The second time you call me, it's going to be a different local North Carolina number, so on and so forth. So, and that's done at the carrier level, and which I think is highly important because it's a 30 to 40% increase in contact rate without using that type of solution. So if you're just rotating numbers manually and, you're going to start getting your calls labeled as scam or spam, and your contact rate's going to just decrease. The other piece is so now we've launched the call. It's a local caller ID, and we want to do these multiple things to it, multiple channels and pieces. In the outbound environment, you have those capabilities of not only doing the call, you can do the text, you can do the email. We also have the environment of Twitter. So if somebody's out there and they're looking for car insurance, well, your rep gets notified of whatever you tagged. So it can get really creative to where it can just be an outbound and also an inbound lead tracking solution.
With regards to the texting, is it sort of a back and forth sort of text capability? So if someone actually responds to a text.
So currently we have just the outgoing. Of creating the ingoing to where it's conversational, which is going to be another big piece of the solution. A lot of people now, it's kind of two camps. At first, they just wanted to send a large amount of text.
Yeah.
So a lot of environments are like, okay, well, send out these texts to these people after the calls. I think one of the most powerful pieces now is sending the text also while you're on the call. So a lot of people just want the legitimacy. A lot of people just want maybe something that they can fill in manually themselves. They might not be comfortable with just talking to you over the phone. So having that ability to send them a link, or having that ability to, in the fundraising world, maybe send them a credit card portal where they can enter in their information. That piece is highly important.
Yeah, that's a great point, because if I'm on the phone and I go, hey, did you get that text? And you can say, yeah, I got it right here. There's a link.
Sure.
I can go and follow through with whatever it is that I was, looking to do. It's good. And then also you get that opt-in and you're communicating via text, and there you go. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. So people are using it for outbound text at the moment. To send out generally you maybe a link or something to that effect, or just a notification of some sort.
Yeah, it could be a campaign. So one of the things that was really heavy in the political world was, texting. So especially, like a peer-to-peer text or vice versa. So there's multiple ways, anything that you can think of how or why you would want to send a text to somebody, either to acknowledge of something that you're doing, or to have them try to be able to go to another website, or maybe you just send them a text to they can have it for later. So those would be kind of the main reasons you would set it, in the lead gen world, in your cadences, right? So if you've attempted to call them and then you want to send them a text and then an email, vice versa, you can also make that a part of that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So I don't want to take too much of your time, but I want to make sure that people can get a hold of you. I mean, you've got, like you said, 20, plus years of experience. I mean, you've run campaigns calling hundreds of thousands of leads
Right.
across multiple industries. I'm sure there's individuals that would love to get a hold of you and talk with you about Noble Biz, about the platform that you guys have built out there, and then just maybe even talk a little shop. How can they get a hold of you to maybe ask some follow-up questions and learn more about Noble Biz if they want to?
Sure. My email's michael.mcguire@noblebiz.com. And you can email me. I'm also on LinkedIn. And, text me, whatever. I can get my cell phone. And, I'm available. I try to tell people, I'm not just the normal technology sales guy, right? So I do have the experience as the end user. I bought dialers and technology for 25 years. So even if I might not be able to help you with the technology piece, I'm sure I can at least help you in other areas that can impact your business.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. It's a hot topic. I mean, there's companies always, talking, they come to me and go, should I be, starting my, internal call center or not? And I have no idea. And I send them to
Right.
you, but
Right.
you help, you can help them make that decision. But it's definitely a hot topic, especially with more and more calls taking place. Whether it's people taking inbound transfers or creating outbound transfers, whatever it may be. I appreciate you coming on and sort of talking a little shop about it. And,
Sure.
hopefully we can do it again, maybe in a few months and see how things are sort of transitioning out of the pandemic and what call centers are doing. Are they staying virtual? Are they bringing people back in house and just sort of touch base again? But yeah, Mike, I really appreciate you joining the call and talking shop. And I'll make sure to put your information up here so
Okay.
people can get a hold of you. And yeah, thanks for joining.
Good talking to you, bud.
All right, man. Take care.
All right. Bye.